On this Thursday night, navigating new variants, the polarizing perspectives on keeping COVID-19 at bay.
This was a prudent thing to do.
As demand for cold medications outpaces supply at some Canadian pharmacies.
As you can see right now, most of my shelf is bare.
The speaker's stalemate in the U.S. and how it's paralyzing government. A royal rumble. Prince Harry's stunning claim his brother attacked him.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Sophie Louie.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. New coronavirus testing is now a reality for thousands of travelers bound for Canada. Starting today, travelers from China, Hong Kong and Macau must provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test prior to departure. The federal government says the temporary requirement will be in place for at least 30 days. By no means is Canada alone on new rules for travel from China. Several European nations, Japan, Australia, and the United States have imposed similar, or in some cases, more severe restrictions. But with growing concern over the new subvariant that's rapidly overtaking cases in the U.S., some are questioning whether Ottawa's focus on China is the right move. Mackenzie Gray has our top story tonight.
Travelers arriving from Hong Kong are reluctantly accepting the new COVID requirements.
The numbers look pretty high over there, so I guess they're just being cautious.
I think it's a good idea because it's helped to safeguard other country.
But experts say the new rules forcing passengers from China, Hong Kong and Macau to have a negative test will do little to stop any potential new variants.
The goal is to keep specific variants from being imported to Canada. We know that those very focused travel measures aren't going to do that.
The transport minister defending the federal government's decision.
Keeping in mind, by the way, the pressure that our public health system is dealing with right now, this was a prudent thing to do.
From Beijing, condemnation for Western countries who have implemented the very same requirements China puts on incoming international travelers. They also said COVID in China was under control. But scenes from Chinese hospitals tell a different story. With lingering vaccine hesitancy and limited immunity from earlier infections, abandoning the previous COVID zero policy has left Chinese hospitals overwhelmed. This doctor admitting his hospital in eastern China is short-staffed. With an estimated 1 million cases a day, experts are worried the situation will deteriorate.
What we're more concerned about with China is that there will be an emergence of a new variant because the number of cases in China is astronomically high.
But it's a new subvariant that has doctors concerned here in Canada. XBB.1.5 is the latest spin-off of Omicron. It's the most transmissible COVID strain yet, but its severity is still unknown.
The early indications with this new variant is that it seems to be about the same severity as the last few variants, which is still far more severe than our influenza, but not as severe as the original.
BC is now reporting 12 cases of XBB.1.5, and Sophie, experts are saying that it's only a matter of time until every province reports cases of the new subvariant.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Mackenzie, thank you. Well, new COVID-19 concerns are just one part of an overwhelming season of respiratory illness that's putting pressure on Canadian hospitals. And adding to that stress is an ongoing shortage of cold and flu medication. Early on, the surge in sickness prompted a run on medicine meant for Canadian children. Now there's a dearth in adult medication as well, leaving more patients and health professionals desperate for help. Touria Izri reports.
One box of generic Tylenol. That will have to last this Ottawa pharmacy until the end of the month.
So as you can see right now, most of my shelf is bare.
Owner Matt Yang is almost out of stock of adults' cold and flu medication, and he doubts his delivery will arrive on time.
The issue is we're not able to order anymore from our supplier. Yeah, so we have been, unfortunately, turning away our customers.
So sick customers are searching endlessly.
I've been in a couple times, was in 2 days ago, nothing.
The last time I wasn't I came in here, I was actually just rushing in assuming I'd find it really quickly, and the shelves were completely empty.
They've been empty on and off for months. In the summer, parents struggled to find children's Advil and Tylenol because of supply chain issues, a rise in respiratory illnesses, and a spike in demand.
And that's usually a time where manufacturers kind of stock up or build up their reserves to get ready for the fall. And unfortunately, because of that kind of heightened level of activity, some of those medications have gone a little bit short across the country, and that's had a spillover effect into now adults.
Health Canada says it's monitoring the situation closely and is having discussions with manufacturers. But doctors, pharmacists, and patients are frustrated this keeps happening over and over again.
This medication shortage has been going on for many years. It's been going on for over a decade.
Now that it's affecting some of the most commonly used medications, health professionals believe it's harder to ignore. To alleviate the shortage, Ottawa imported 1 million bottles of children's cold and flu medicine last November. But with 90% of drugs coming from abroad, doctors warn it does not address the supply problem.
Either we have the ability to manufacture them here, or we must be able to stockpile them. So, for example, Australia has a law that says that all suppliers of drugs must stockpile 6 months.
And without a plan, the drug shortage threatens to put more pressure on an already overburdened healthcare system. Touria Izri, Global News, Ottawa.
Canada's transport minister says the federal government is looking to make it easier for air passengers to receive compensation from airlines following flight cancellations.
This is something that I am consulting with Transportation Canada on. We're looking forward to figuring out what other measures can we put in our passenger bill of rights to make sure that the airlines are the ones who are responsible for these claims.
The comments come after Omar Al-Gabra spoke with the CEO of Sunwing Airlines, who assured him passengers would be compensated for last month's widespread cancellations that left hundreds of Canadians stranded over the holidays. The airline also issued a public apology today in which it admitted to clear failures in responding to the weather-related delays. Chaos has erupted in the Mexican state of Sinaloa following the arrest of cartel leader Ovidio Guzman, El Chapo's son. Buses are burning around the city of Culiacan, about 2 hours north of Mazatlan. An Aeromexico plane scheduled to fly to Mexico City this morning was hit by gunfire on the tarmac, but no injuries have been reported. That airport and the Mazatlan airport are now closed. The federal government is advising Canadians in the area to shelter in place. The political circus underway in the U.S. has dragged into its third day now, with lawmakers appearing no closer to electing a House Speaker. Republicans still can't even agree on a nominee. Party leader Kevin McCarthy has offered new concessions, but a small group of hardline Republicans is standing in his way. And that has created a humiliating deadlock with major impacts on government operations. Jackson Proskow is following the developing details. Jackson, where do we stand with things now?
Well, Sophie, we haven't seen this level of dysfunction in a speaker's race since before the American Civil War. And what is so remarkable as this all unfolds is that Kevin McCarthy keeps making major concessions to his opponents and getting nothing in return. All day long, he lost vote after vote after vote by the same margin. Tonight, there are rumors of a partial deal in the works behind the scenes, but so far, no one has moved in their positions. The path forward is completely unclear. And big picture, of course, in the long term, there are questions about damage being done here to the Republican Party's reputation, with many Americans watching this circus and wondering if anyone is going to be able to control this Congress and if Republicans are going to be able to do anything with their newfound majority.
It's going to make it more difficult for them to accomplish anything. And they were already having the deck stacked against them, because a Democratic Senate and a Democratic White House would probably stymie anything they were pushing. But it's been a spectacle and a disaster for the Republicans.
Well, Jackson, without a speaker, can government function?
Essentially, no. This is an important procedural milestone, and until a speaker is elected, no member of Congress can actually officially be sworn in and actually start doing their jobs. That means right now they can't serve their constituents, they can't have meetings or receive classified briefings, and they can't conduct the basic business of government. Now, they've only lost a few days' work so far, but if this drags on much longer, it could have serious consequences. As one analyst put it to me today, thank goodness there isn't a national emergency or war underway right now that would require the intervention of the House. Sophie?
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for that, Jackson. Proskow in Washington. Cincinnati doctors say Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin has made substantial improvements since his cardiac arrest Monday on the football field. The 24-year-old is on a ventilator but is still awake, and his neurological function is intact. Doctors say Hamlin's age, fitness, and the immediate medical response help prevent any identifiable brain damage.
First question that he wrote when he started to awaken was did we win? So we know that it's not only that the lights are on, we know that he's home, and that it appears that all the cylinders are firing within his brain, which is greatly gratifying.
The game against the Cincinnati Bengals was suspended, and there are reports it won't resume. Tests are ongoing to determine the cause of Hamlin's cardiac arrest. The Buffalo Bills return to practice today for the first time since his collapse.
Yeah.
And actor Jeremy Renner has posted this video from his hospital bed in Reno, Nevada. He says his mom and sister made a not-so-great ICU day into a great spa day, thanks to that head massage and shampoo under the shower cap. Renner was run over by his own snowcat on New Year's Day. The 51-year-old is recovering from blunt chest trauma and orthopedic injuries. A final farewell at the Vatican. Coming up, the unprecedented funeral for a former pope. An historic funeral held today at the Vatican, with the current Pope, Francis, presiding over the ceremony for his predecessor, Benedict, who died on New Year's Eve. Some of the 50,000 attendees there already calling out in Latin for his sainthood. It was a simple ceremony, but not without pageantry. He has now been buried in the grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica, in the same tomb where Pope John Paul II lay before becoming a saint and having his coffin moved. As Redmond Shannon reports, this funeral puts the future of the Roman Catholic Church in the spotlight.
Beneath the chilly Vatican mist, a papal funeral like none other in modern times. Marking the life of a former pope, Benedict XVI, who stepped down from the role almost a decade ago. A smaller crowd than for previous papal deaths, his somewhat mixed legacy inspiring respect among the flock more than it does adoration. Unlike the death of a sitting pope, this was not a state funeral, but it still attracted dignitaries and leaders from traditionally Catholic countries. The main difference from every other papal funeral for the last 6 centuries, the presence of a current pontiff, the now frail Pope Francis presiding over the service.
Pater Clementissime.
Gracious Father, we commend to your mercy Pope Emeritus Benedict, a fearless preacher of your word.
86-year-old Francis has said that he may one day follow Benedict and retire if his health fails. Benedict's decision to step aside in 2013 likely informed by the long reign of his predecessor, John Paul II.
In his latter years, and particularly towards his death, he was clearly a very, very frail man who'd lost his ability to lead.
With the precedent set, the dynamics of Vatican succession may now have changed forever.
It is the College of Cardinals who elect the next pope, but I'm sure there's all sorts of jostling for position going on, and a lot hangs on it because Pope Francis has been making appointments of cardinals who are more likely to continue his vision of the church.
Theologian Tina Beattie says part of that vision is the ongoing consultation process with Catholics worldwide to shape the future direction of the church, something Francis will want to lead over the coming 2 years. Whatever the future of Francis, the Catholic Church does not change fast. The ancient traditions on display at Benedict's burial in the crypt of St. Peter's Basilica is a testament to that. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Changing child welfare. Ahead, the calls to fix a failing system after the tragic death of an Indigenous child. The apprehension and treatment of Indigenous children by child welfare systems across the country is under the microscope in a scathing report out of Alberta this week. A judge has released new recommendations after an inquiry into the death of a 4-year-old girl. Serenity died 8 years ago while in the care of relatives. But as Heather Urix-West reports, the judge says the child's death can be traced back to the day she was taken from her mother.
Her story is difficult to hear. 4-year-old Serenity, emaciated and covered in bruises, died of head trauma in 2014. She had been living with relatives. 8 years later, an Alberta judge has found the events leading to her death began the day she was removed from her mother's care.
Things are being said that, that have needed also to been said for a long time. There was a lot of wrongdoing.
Serenity's guardians were charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life, though not in connection to her death. Those charges were eventually stayed. In a report released Wednesday, Justice Renee Coulter made nearly 24 recommendations on how to prevent similar tragedies, focusing first on a child's apprehension itself. The first priority of Children's Services is to ensure that Indigenous mothers, especially young Indigenous mothers, receive the support they need to raise their children in a healthy environment, she said. While Indigenous children make up less than 8% of Canada's overall child population, they represent more than half of the kids in foster care. Canada's child welfare systems are often called the residential schools of present day.
We need to tear this whole system down. That's what needs to happen. There is no fixing this system because Children's Services is not a broken system. Children's Services is a system that is working exactly the way it was intended to work.
It's why many First Nations and Métis settlements are now working towards taking over as child welfare services providers for their communities.
This is the beginning of the end of the child welfare system as we know it. I see the First Nations formulating their own law, and which will have a huge impact on Indigenous children and Métis children. And I think will be a better step.
One that will hopefully lead to significant change, with fewer Indigenous children ending up in provincial care. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
Prince Harry's new book, Spare, isn't even on store shelves yet, but it's already making headlines with Harry's claim he was attacked by his brother. According to the UK newspaper The Guardian, which saw an advance copy of the book, Harry says he was physically attacked by Prince William during a heated conversation about Harry's wife, Meghan. He writes, "It all happened so fast, so very fast. He grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace, and he knocked me to the floor." The leaked passage goes on to say William returned, remorseful, and apologized. Spare will officially be released January 10th. An amateur archaeologist has helped discover the meaning behind a primitive writing system used by hunter-gatherers 20,000 years ago. Ben Bacon, who's a British furniture restorer by trade, worked to decode dots and other markings on paintings. He deduced those marks were to record the mating cycles of animals. His research is now being published alongside a team from Durham University in the UK. That's Global National for this Thursday. I'm Sophie Louis. Tonight's Your Canada is this bird's eye view of a neighborhood in Kimberley, British Columbia. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow.